Welcome to the Wednesday. Is it Wednesday already? I don't even know. Wednesday stream. I hope everyone's having an awesome Wednesday. Welcome. It is cold indeed. Welcome, Heat. Michael Hassler. Alio, welcome. He also left before the jury exited as an extra little disrespect to the process. He's above the law. Well, he thinks he is. He feels that way, and I think that in a lot of sense, he's been given way too much leeway, in my personal opinion. Had it been anybody else, that dude would have been in jail. Donald Trump's defamation trial goes completely off the rails as the judge slaps him down with some of the harshest words to date, causing Trump to lash out at him. This is one surefire way to ensure that the judge rules against you. Yeah, I remember reading about this. I mean, he should have just tossed him out. He knows he's cooked. He knows he's cooked. Alright, folks. Sorry I had a bit of a late start. Apparently, I had meant to start the stream, and I just never clicked the button properly, because when I came back, apparently the stream was never started. So yeah, sorry about that, folks. So we're just gonna get right into it because we have I've already messed up by not starting on time. All right, let's talk about this.
Do you think that young progressives in the United States will ultimately rally behind Joe Biden in November, or has he seriously damaged his standing?
Look, I think we will see what happens in November because the choice is pretty clear. Running against Donald Trump, who I suspect will be the Republican candidate is one of the most dangerous political figures in modern American history. So I think people will end up rallying around Biden. But there is no question, it is very hard for young people, I think for most Americans, to be excited about what is going on right now. President has got to change course. He has been very clear. He has expressed his concern about, quote unquote, indiscriminate bombing. He has asked Netanyahu,
quote unquote. No, it's the admission of the own of the Israeli government. So I don't know. I don't even know why we're dancing around that, but okay. Listen, I know that Bernie has been pretty disappointing to say the least, but ultimately the point is that it's important to have more Congress people start talking like this. Cook, Trump, there's a thought, convicted and lose 2024 election would be very nice.
over and over again to change course. Netanyahu just yesterday said, no, we're going to continue doing what we are doing. Unacceptable. You cannot give billions of dollars to a country that ignores your wishes, violates international law. So I would hope that the president follows through on his concerns and says to Netanyahu, this is unacceptable. You're not getting a nickel more from the United States unless you radically change course.
Damn, it's almost like that's what I've been saying for a while now.
We're not going to see hundreds and hundreds of thousands of children starve to death.
Look, I have my disagreements with Bernie Sanders when it comes to Israel. He somehow still is not calling for a ceasefire, which is so disappointing to me because he actually recognizes the severity of the humanitarian crisis created in Gaza specifically because of Israel's war crimes. So it's mind-boggling to me that he can't say the word ceasefire. But despite that, he still is using his power in meaningful ways, and I think that he deserves credit for that. For example, he's forcing a vote on a resolution that will force the State Department to report on Israel's human rights abuses, and if they fail to comply and don't release said report within 30 days, then aid to Israel is automatically cut off.
Yeah, so, I mean, like, this is like the most, like, a bare minimum, like the most bare thing that you could probably ask, and, they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. How embarrassing is it that Rand Paul, of all people, Rand Paul, had a better vote than this in most of the Democratic Senate. He's a genocide late. Yep. Just shy over, what, 23,000? There's talk of running Michelle Obama if something happens to Biden. Not a chance. She's not interested. Chances of Michelle Obama running for president is like the same chances of me winning the lotto. And I haven't played the lotto.
Now, that's not going to pass, but I think that the effort overall is still good. It's important. Nonetheless, Bernie's overall position on Israel, to me, just seems completely incoherent because he's only calling for a humanitarian pause, which makes no sense because the humanitarian disaster that he's describing continues to unfold after there already was a humanitarian pause. So another one isn't going to make a difference. If you genuinely want the violence to stop permanently, you would call for a ceasefire, and he hasn't done that. But two things can be true at once. He's bold enough to attempt to cut off aid to Israel. That matters, but he's not bold enough to address the root cause of the humanitarian crisis that he's against. But when it comes to what he says about Biden, he is absolutely right, even if he's using kid gloves to handle the situation. Biden is continuing to express concerns about Israel.
It's Jover. My stepdad brought that up the other night. Who, Michelle Obama?
But he's not making actual demands. He's not doing what he needs to do to stop the genocide. And in the absence of actual demands and threats to cut off aid, nothing is going to change. But don't take my word for it. Let's actually listen to what a Likud party member of the Knesset said on Israeli television. Now, this clip is from December 8th, and it recently gained traction, so it's a little bit old, but it's still true as of today.
What? December 8th? That was like last month, okay? I mean, I guess in internet speak, last month is like ages ago, but that's pretty recent, okay?
יש לנו שיח. לא תמיד מסכימים על הכל. היו מחלוקות מההתחלה דרך אגב. הם לא הסכימו לתימון קרקעי, נכנסנו קרקעית. הם לא הסכימו לבית חולים שיפה, התעלמנו מהבקשה שלהם. כן. הם רצו הפוגה בלי חטופים, לא הסכמנו להם. מה שדווח בהתחלת המהדורה, ולשמחתי תוקן, אין אולטימטום אמריקאי, אין דדליין של ארצות הברית, אנחנו עובדים, צריכים להמשיך להכות בחמאס, וגם אם זה יבוא למקום של עימות עם ארצות הברית, צריך להמשיך עד הסוף.
Quote, we have no American ultimatum, there is no...
Yeah, so another way of putting it is that they're just wiping their ass with us. I mean, with allies like that, Yeah, that was so last year. And I've heard AM radio talk about it in the past week also. I seriously doubt it. I will eat my hat on stream if Michelle Obama decides that, I will eat my hat on stream if two things happen. Biden is incapacitated, and Michelle Obama takes his place. Okay, I will eat my hat on stream if those two things happen as a consequence of each other. Yeah, I'm so confident that that's not going to happen that I'm willing to put that on the line, okay? Eating my own beanie, I know it's a pretty big bet that I'm putting on the table, okay? Echo Resto Dragon, welcome.
No deadline from the U.S.
Hi, Mark Barden at Sandy Hook Promise here. When the gunman...
Therein lies the problem. We've all been saying it. Israel is admitting it now. They're not facing pressure from Biden, therefore, these disagreements don't really amount to much. Now, I've shared this article before, but this particular paragraph is worth repeating. So in an op-ed for The Nation, Trita Parsi explains, in 1982, President Ronald Reagan was disgusted by Israeli bombardment of Lebanon. He stopped the transfer of cluster munitions to Israel and told Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin in a phone call that this is a Holocaust. Reagan demanded that Israel withdraw its troops from Lebanon. Begin caved. 20 minutes after their phone call, Begin ordered a halt on attacks. So the Reagan administration made a demand and they cut off weapons to Israel. And guess what? They were forced to acquiesce.
Right, because they have no other choice.
So the question is, why won't Biden do the same? He's not powerless.
No, he's not.
So he's making a choice. The Biden administration's decision to allow this to continue is a choice. He is choosing to be a willing participant in the ethnic cleansing and genocide of the people of Gaza. And that choice may cost him the election. Because as Bernie Sanders correctly put it, young voters aren't excited to rally around a candidate responsible for the deaths of 24,000 civilians, including 10,000 children. And the polls currently reflect that. The Hill reports in an ABC News Ipsos poll conducted January 4th through 8th, only 33% of those surveyed said they approved of Biden, a drop from the previous poll in September of 2023, when 37% approved of his performance. Biden's disapproval rating is 58%, up from 56% in September. ABC News said it's the lowest approval rating since former President George W. Bush from 2006 to 2008. Biden, who is running for re-election, has a lower approval rating than former President Trump, who is leading the GOP nominee for president. Disastrous. And this is one of many polls indicating Biden is losing support.
I just posted in chat. Yeah, I saw. It's the same one you posted in the stream earlier.
In other words, there's an iceberg dead ahead, and the Biden administration is sailing right into it at full speed. Not even trying.
Damn. Hey, does Mike Figueroa follow my freaking page? Okay, I know this is egotistical. I literally made that comparison. Obviously, it may be the case that other people have made the same comparison, but I literally made that same comparison of iceberg ahead, okay? There's like literally everybody telling there's literally people telling them that there's an iceberg ahead, and we're being told that there isn't one. How would that cost them the election? Trump isn't going to help Palestinians at all. That may be the case. It's the point. The problem is that while that's true, and while Trump may end up even being worse in terms of the Gaza situation, people are angry enough that they may stay home. Specifically, the groups that historically came out in 2020 may not show up in 2024. That's the problem. It is true that, and I would bet on it, that Trump would be worse. Biden is depressing his own vote. That's the problem. I know he does, just to steal analogies, true. Biden will probably lose Michigan just because of his handling of Israel and Palestine. Yeah, and that's a big, that's one of the swing states, is it not? That's important.
To steer away from it. And this isn't happening because the demographics who voted for Biden in 2020 have suddenly become red-pilled and they're all Trump supporters. It is because they are disillusioned with Biden.
Yeah, oh, no, wow. And I didn't pre-watch this, by the way. Damn, it's almost like the collective hive mind here is... unless, you know, the collective hive mind is reading the writing on the wall, right? The problem is that this is disillusioning people. It's depressing the vote, or potentially depressing the vote. That's the problem. Unless people keep holding a grudge on Israel for Biden, I mean, it's pretty horrific what's happening. So, yeah, I would imagine. It's not holding a grudge. Why would you say holding a grudge? It's more like, hey, it's not just holding a grudge. It's like, hey, the dude that's selling the weapons refuses to do anything about it. You know, Michigan also has the largest population of Muslims in the U.S. Biden's doing okay, so let's vote for the guy that will actually throw out democracy. Well, I disagree that Biden is doing okay. I don't think he's doing okay in this situation. I mean, it shows. People are angry. I really don't think it's Biden's fault. It's Bibi, but he keeps giving him weapons. So it is. The Biden administration bypassed Congress to do an arms sale, to do an arms deal. How is this not Biden's fault? That's like selling a gun to a known criminal who you know is going to commit crimes with the gun, and then claiming that you have no responsibility over that. Does that make sense? This is like selling a gun to a known criminal who's telling you they're going to commit crimes with this gun, and then trying to absolve any responsibility. Does that make sense? You may not agree, but it's the truth. You know, you may not agree, but that's on you. The truth is the truth, regardless of whether you agree or not, right? Because no logical person would say that the person selling the gun to the criminal is absolved of any liability, right? Like that's not a thing. In fact, legally speaking, if you sell a gun to a known criminal, you're going to jail for that. Does that make sense? Because it doesn't absolve you of any responsibility. So Biden doing these arms deals, circumventing Congress, which he's not supposed to do, is akin to the same thing. You may have an opinion, but whether or not it's based on reality, it's, remains to be seen. Here's a question. Real quick question. Okay, so let's establish something really quickly. Do you believe that selling a do you believe that selling a gun knowingly selling a gun to a criminal is bad? Knowing that he's going to use knowing that he's going to use that gun to commit crimes, would you say that is illegal? Would you say that is wrong? Would you say that you are responsible for what happens as a consequence of you selling the gun to the criminal? Would you say that that is a fair assessment? This is a very simple yes or no question. What I'm saying is whatever we currently have will be exponentially worse under Don John. Oh, I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing with that. So prove a negative, turn on Israel and Biden would... No, it's not proving a negative. How are you proving a negative? If I sell a gun to a criminal and they commit crimes, am I not responsible for that? Your train of thought does not track since Israel is not a criminal. Yeah, they are committing war crimes. You can say whatever you want, but they are committing war crimes. So it absolutely tracks. It absolutely tracks. So, again, I'm not asking you to prove a negative. It's a very simple scenario, very simple question. If I knowingly sell a gun to a criminal, does that make me responsible? That's a nice opinion, but it's an opinion. Not really. It's not an opinion. It's not an opinion. Israel's an ally. Bibi is a criminal. The Hague. No, I'm asking a simple question. I don't care. I'm asking a very simple question. If I sell a gun, if I knowingly sell a gun to a criminal, does that make me responsible for the consequences that happen as a result of that? It's a simple yes or no. Israel's an ally? Well, what a shit ally. Conscious Canuck subscribing for 23 months with a tier 1 sub. Thank you. That's called Just Another Day in America. I know, but I'm trying to establish I'm trying to establish a train of logic using this analogy. So it's a very simple yes or no question. Most of our allies are pretty terrible. True. Not wrong. So this is very simple. If I knowingly sell a gun to a criminal, am I responsible for the consequences of that action that come from that? I'm not defending Israel, but by that logic, because of gun violence and America's always guilty. Well, holy crap, are we on to something? Okay, yes, but we arrived at a very weird place, but yes, they would be guilty, right? Because you would be guilty, right? Because if you knowingly sell a gun to a known criminal and they do something, you are responsible for that, right? So by that logic, then America is responsible for the arms that they sell to their allies who are now committing atrocities with it. And I'm not making this up. The Biden administration literally circumvented Congress on emergency weapon sales. They are knowingly selling the guns. Do you understand? Do you understand the problem? So burn down America? And that's you're trying to pivot away from that. I'm not talking about that. The point being is that we can't excuse this. Okay? It's not okay. It's just not okay to do this. Okay? And Biden is losing support because people don't like that. In fact, I would argue, because of Biden's actions, it is closer to that happening. Because of Biden's actions, it is possible that we end up with a fascist government. If the U.S. was consistent that impeachment is then served for approval, politics plays favorites. I don't know what that has to do with the point. No Justice, MTG, and KF Logan rating with a party of 41. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. Folks, if you don't know who I am a Difficult Truth. We do the news, we do the politics, Monday through Thursday. Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. If you enjoy your stay, don't forget to follow. Don't forget to follow. You get free emotes. Well, the U.S. has been fascist since the beginning. No, not like how we understand how fascist, not how we understand how fascism works. Welcome, everybody. Every single president in history is a war criminal. Every single one. Yes. And my point is that it's not okay to excuse it. It was both of them rated with a party of 41 each, so 82 raters. Welcome, everybody. Jesus. Hey, it's the Morton. How's it going? Mad Cat, Wayward Historian, Eric, Jim Speak, Gray Yon Wannabe. Thank you for the follows. Welcome in, everybody. Quick shout out, KF Logan. Please go follow them. Please go watch their content. And No Justice MTG, which I have seen in the chat before. I have seen them in the chat before because I recognize that. I recognize the username. Besides, it's almost a cliche now. War criminal. It's not a cliche if it's true. Or if it is a cliche, it doesn't make it any less if it's true. Does that make sense? Like, we know that we know that the Israeli government is committing war crimes, right? We know that they're doing the war crimes. We know because behind the scenes, the Biden administration's tangential bureaucrats, for a lack of a better word, are not happy. But believes that selling a weapon to a known criminal does not make you responsible for the action of the criminal with their newly purchased weapon. No, I think it does. I think it does. And it's not just, I'm not just like saying that to say it. I know it does because you'd go to jail. You'd go to jail. Literally, like one of the things that come up if you look up like the ways private sales of firearms are done, if you know that this person is a criminal or you suspect, if you even suspect or if you even think that this person is a criminal, felon, not supposed to have a firearm, that will come back that will come back on you 100%. I didn't already plant this question without knowing the answer. Does that make sense? The SCOTUS doesn't declare war. We know that. The SCOTUS does not declare war. Mouselander, welcome. On top of that, you could be liable, yes, civilly. But I'm talking about like you'd go to jail. You'd go to jail. Does the selling a steak to a known chef make you responsible for the meal the chef made? No, this is incomparable. This is incomparable because, like, a gun is specifically designed to, be a gun and kill. That's why I brought this up in the parallel analogy as to we're responsible if we're doing things like, doing emergency weapon sales to Israel. We're responsible. A more comparable analogy, Conscious Canuck, would be if you knowingly sell a steak that is poisonous, you would be liable, right? Or not poisonous, but you selling a steak that's bad. I don't know if that's completely analogous, but close enough. I mean, like, just like researching it from my state, okay? I'm not making this up. Any person who knowingly or intentionally provides a firearm to a felon will be guilty of a felony. The punishment will be a prison. So I'm not making this up. So if we know that there's some kind of responsibility, for selling a firearm to a felon, then why are we okay with knowingly doing emergency weapon sales to provide for war crimes? That is a matter of law, not morals. I mean, like, even morally, like, if you're selling a weapon to a known criminal and you knowingly are doing this, then you are responsible, yes, morally and legally. Okay? In my personal opinion, and of course the law agrees with me. But that's besides the point. I mean, to me it seems obvious that if you knowingly do this, then you bear some responsibility, right? Where in the world are you? America. So Twitch will take away the U.S. president. I don't know what Twitch has to do with this, but no, the commander-in-chief has limited powers. They can't just do this, okay? And how does it look when a branch of government is unilaterally taking decisions without checks and balances? The whole point is to have checks and balances. if the executive branch is just doing, if it's just doing things on its own without Congress, that's a problem. If the Supreme Court is doing shit without any checks and balances, that's a problem. Does that make sense? Isn't that what executive orders do? Yeah, but even executive orders have checks and balances. Because they can be challenged. Not to mention, chat's right. They're also limited. They're not legislation, and would technically last until the next president takes them away. So to circle back, like the whole point of this entire conversation is like there is a there's a real reason why people are angry. Okay, it's not a grudge. There's a legitimate reason as to why people are angry with the Biden administration, and there's a legitimate reason as to why people are putting as to why people are pointing the finger at him. But playing favorites or not removal of any SCOTUS judge and no impeachment for Biden administration for any... I don't know. We're not talking about impeachment. Nor Reagan. And how's this? Why do we allow a private entity to manufacture and sell weapons capable of genocidal acts? Why don't we disband said entity for their responsibility in the genocide? There's a thought. There's a thought. But the point of the analogy, just to refresh that, the point of the analogy is that you bear responsibility. I just have a different perspective. Yeah, but like the analogy, I think, in my opinion, works, right? If you knowingly sell a weapon to a criminal, you are responsible. You are responsible, right? Like you have a responsibility. So we have a responsibility by selling weapons to Israel. We shoulder that responsibilities. Like we can't just say we have no responsibility as to what Israel is doing when we're the ones providing the weapons to do so. Does that make sense? My mother is Cuban and loves America, but hypocrisy will exist. Not even about hypocrisy. The problem here is that we're directly responsible, and we have a obligation, in my opinion, to tell the Israeli government, you need to stop this. That's the whole point of this conversation, is just to arrive at that point.
And they plan to forego voting altogether, which is a huge problem, in particular when it comes to young.
And because of this, as the conversation was still revolving around this, because of this, because people are angry about this, and because people are rightfully pointing the responsibility and pointing the finger at the Biden administration. It's going to depress the vote. While people are not going to vote for Trump, they're going to stay home. While it automatically doesn't mean people are just going to vote for Trump, they're going to stay home. Yeah, let's start by stop sending them weapons. Bare minimum, that's the first thing that should be on the line. Yes, check out the merch store. Look at that. Wall Street Journal just wrote an article about removing troops from Israel. You mean Israel removing troops from Gaza? Is that what you're saying?
Young people. Teen Vogue's Fortessa Latifi explains, after a record-breaking youth turnout in 2020 helped decide the election for President Joe Biden, a recent poll released by Harvard Kennedy School shows that young Americans seem less likely to vote in 2024.
Yeah, that's a problem, okay? Remember how you were talking about the 2020 election? Yeah, the reason why I'm not as confident is because the reason why Biden won the way he did was because there was an unprecedented turnout, especially among people, the groups of people that normally have a history of having bad turnout, which is young people. That may not be the case in 2024. And if he doesn't change course, then he's going to depress the vote. Ali with the 14 betties, thank you. Will the Tangerine Ball Bag ramp up this aid to settler colonial entity? I'm really bloody angry about the state of birth of our politics. We need a shot of a lot of them. Well, I can say this. Trump is going to be like just worse, like factually just worse. President Biden can go on air and apologize for... No, he doesn't need to apologize for Israel. He needs to tell him to stop. And I don't mean behind the scenes. I mean, he needs to make it very public that aid and weapons are no longer on the table if they don't stop. He needs to do, ironically, what President Reagan did. Get on the phone and say, listen, if you're not going to play ball, then you know what? Tomorrow, I'm going to make a public announcement that the United States is no longer going to give you aid and money, weapons and aid. That's it. If you don't stop this, I'm going to go on television tomorrow and make a public announcement that the United States will no longer support Israel. Weapons, money, nothing. Watch how fast watch how fast the attitude changes. Praising Reagan? Yeah, he got it done. That's the attitude, or rather the strategy. Like, we're pretending that Biden is incapable of doing this. Heat with the 10 biddies, thank you. When issues of morals like this come up, I always analyze from the first, third, and universal perspectives. That's too deep for me. I just see what's in front of me, you know? Yeah, literally one phone call. You're right. Literally one phone call. I don't need him to apologize for Israel. I need him to make a phone call and threaten Netanyahu by saying, hey, you know, either you play ball or all of this is done. It's over. It's that simple.
Than they were in 2020. According to the poll at this point in the 2020 election cycle, 57% of Americans between ages 18 and 29 were planning to vote. That number has since declined to 49%, though Gen Z voters prefer President Biden over his likely challenger, former President Donald Trump. Only 35% of this demographic approves of Biden's performance as president.
Yeah, and like I said, these people aren't going to vote for Trump. The problem is that they're going to stay home.
Now, let's just pause right there and address the implications of this if it's not already obvious to everyone. If this stands, if these numbers don't change, and we actually see an 8% decrease in youth turnout and not an increase from 2020, Biden loses this election. I'll repeat that. Biden loses, and Donald Trump, with Project 2025 in mind and with him promising to be a dictator, but only for a day, will win this election. Democracy as we know it will be over. So this cannot stand, and you can try to blame young people. You can say it's irrational for them to hand the election to Trump, but ultimately, many of them are going to stay home.
Yeah.
So Biden is the one.
Right. So the responsibility lies within the Democratic Party to then, it's incumbent upon them to get people to vote for them. It's that simple. It's literally just that black and white. It's incumbent upon the Democratic Party to do what it needs to do to get people to vote for them. If they don't want to do that and they don't want to campaign, or they're refusing to listen to the people who will come out and vote for them, and instead they will stay home, then that's really the fault of the Democratic Party. Except I don't think Biden can do that because the U.S. needs Israel's resource for intelligence gathering, surveillance, and information security. I don't think so. That doesn't work for me. You gotta give people something to vote for, not just vote against. Yeah, that worked. That worked in 2020. Okay, that was a one-trick pony. People saw what Donald Trump was, and people got 4 years of Donald Trump, and that was it. That was your one. That was the one-trick pony. Okay. In fact, I almost would bet that the Democratic Party knew this, because Biden's whole shtick was that he was supposed to be a one-term president. He was supposed to be a transitory president. And we're now supposed to be, fighting it out to see who the next nominee in an open primary would have been. That's what was supposed to happen. That's what we had. That was the impression that we were given, which is, again, probably part of the tiny bit of a reason why people decided to go out, especially young people who weren't too crazy about Biden to begin with. Said, okay, if it's between, we've had 4 years of Trump, we need to get this guy out, and hey, this guy is going to be the transitory president, and so we'll just get Donald Trump out. Do you have any stats on Gen X? I'm worried because all the Americans I see in the news from America is, unfortunately, I don't. I'm a millennial, so I'm not. I'm a millennial, so I'm not apathetic. I'm jaded.
Who has to make the change? The onus is on him. And it's not like he doesn't have enough time to change course. Teen Vogue actually spoke to young voters, and I think that these anecdotes are really important, but they're not representative of all of Gen Z and millennials, but here's what they're saying nonetheless. Elias, who is a Palestinian American, has a laundry list of issues with the current administration that have pushed him to this point of not voting, including sales of new oil and gas leases and Biden's support of Israel. For Elias, the deciding moment came when Biden cast doubt on the Gaza Health Ministry's reported death tolls. Quote, "I found that to be truly monstrous," he says. "It's something I cannot co-sign with my name and my vote." Lillian, a college student in New York, is undecided about voting this year. She's been disappointed by the Democrats on so many issues, including Biden's promise to forgive $10,000 of student loans, which was ultimately struck down by the Supreme Court, the party's neglecting to further efforts to codify abortion, and the president's support of Israel. London, 24, doesn't want to hear a guilt trip for not planning to vote in the 2024 presidential election. It won't work, she says, and stop telling her that Biden is the lesser of two evils, because she's tired of that argument. Every 4 years, we're told to choose the lesser of two evils and things will get better, she says, and it just doesn't get better. Leah voted for Biden in 2020, but is considering withholding her vote in 2024 because of what she sees as the disappointing outcomes of his presidency. She doesn't agree with Biden about funding Israel's war on Hamas, and she's saddled by student loans the president said he would forgive. Quote, "It felt like kind of a con," she says, about then candidate Biden's proposal to forgive $10,000 of student loan debt per borrower. "I don't want to vote for Biden. I want a better option." Now, for the record, I hope that young people don't stay home. I hope they actually do exercise their right to vote, because I think that voting is important. And I don't agree that there's no difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I do think that there are discernible and important differences between Democrats and Republicans. And really, my thoughts on voting in general was perfectly articulated in this video by Olaimi. I'll link to that down below. But you don't have to agree with their reasoning, but you can't pretend as if their votes don't matter. They do matter. And vote shaming them isn't going to be
Right. He's completely correct on this. He's 100% correct on this.
ineffective strategy. Otherwise, it would have worked in 2016. Many young people said they were going to stay home then, and many did. But their votes matter, and they must be won over. And if they're not going to be won over, then different young people must be mobilized, right? Young people were already disappointed with Biden after the Supreme Court struck down his student debt cancellation plan. He said that he would pursue cancellation through the Higher Education Act. But as far as we know, that's just in limbo. He's kind of nibbling around the edges with small amounts of cancellation here and there for anyone who...
Approximately 30,000. Well, yeah, okay, I see. So anywhere between those numbers, yeah. Just as a quick tidbit.
Qualifies, but the overwhelming majority of us still have student debt. And even his SAVE Act, which is good in theory, hasn't benefited a lot of us till this point because applications that we've submitted have been stuck in limbo for months. So there's really been no real relief for student debt holders. And on top of that, he chose to restart student loan repayments, which was bound to piss off young people. So you've got that. You've got all these reasons why young people were, I think, reasonably and rightfully disillusioned with Biden. But then you add a genocide to the list as well. And you begin to see why young people feel so frustrated with the Biden administration, why so many of them are just saying, I'm out. I'm not going to vote. What's the point? It doesn't feel like my life is changing meaningfully, so I'm just going to choose to stay home. Now, again, I don't agree. I think that who's in the White House does matter. But you can't just write these concerns off and hope things get better and cross your fingers, because that's not a gamble that I'm willing to make, especially when democracy really is on the line. But I mean, it's not just young people. Biden has lost support of Arab Americans in key swing states, and his attempt to repair that relationship hasn't been going well, to put it mildly. Abed Ayoub of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee tweeted this, quote, Biden is scheduled to travel to Michigan at the end of the month to meet with Arab American voters. There's a problem. Many are rejecting the invite to meet, while others have rebuffed outreach efforts. The meetings are in jeopardy and currently looking like they won't happen in Dearborn, which was the Biden team's first and preferred choice. Don't be surprised if this trip is, quote, postponed due to scheduling. Reality is starting to set in for many that our community won't forget about the genocide. Yeah. Now, I get that it's still early and things can change, including feelings, and I'm guessing that a lot is going to change between now and November. But the question is, will enough things change? And that's debatable. There's going to be a lot of people, especially Arab Americans, who's not going to change their mind because this is personal to them. They have relatives that died in Gaza, right? And Joe Biden has tuned them out, not listened to their concerns up until this point. And I'm glad that he's at least aware that now he needs to make an effort to reach out to the Arab American community because he needs their support to win states like Michigan. But he kind of waited a little long, right? He's still allowing the genocide to go on, so it might be a little too late. But at least he knows that there needs to be an effort made. When it comes to young people, the administration seemingly doesn't even have a strategy in place to address their concerns. And I say this because in an interview with Joy Reid on MSNBC, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who is an advisor to Biden's 2024 campaign, he really did not have a strong answer when he was asked about Biden's weakness with young voters. So let's listen to what he has to say. And then there's a follow-up that's even worse. But first, here he is.
I think that there is some significant anecdotal evidence that President Biden does have some issues in terms of parts of the younger electorate that are not in a good place with him on things like Gaza, on the bombing of Yemen. There were just protests outside of the White House this past week. There is some energy that's building, particularly among Arab American voters, Muslim American voters who say they will not vote for him because of his stance on Gaza. Is it bedwetting, or is the White House maybe not paying enough attention to real passionate objections to its policies by younger voters that they need to turn out? And I mean younger.
Yeah, they need to turn out. They need to turn out. And the only way you're going to do that is by catering to them. That's how this works.
Voters, including younger African American voters.
Well, when you're a responsible leader, when you're in office, you have to make tough decisions, no doubt about it. And every time you have to make a tough decision, someone doesn't like it. The truth is that we've seen Joe Biden underestimated all along.
Okay, but this makes no sense. Oh, well, somebody's always going to cry. Okay, but the people who are angry right now are the people who presumably are going to or not going to turn out to vote for you. Something I was under the impression that was important.
In his entire career, and especially in 2020. In 2024, I think what we're going to see is a real focus on the things that really matter to people's individual lives, to their families, to their communities. And that's, the economy. It means their freedoms. We talked about choice. In a lot of places in the country, people are deeply concerned about gun violence. And we know that Joe Biden has stood up for a ban on assault weapons, and he has.
What? This has to do with why, the whole question was about the real danger of losing young voters.
Stood up for violence prevention programs in a way that Republicans just want to let go and, frankly, let people shoot each other wherever they may be with as many guns as they may want to have. So I do think that a focus on the issues that really matter to working families across the United States is going to matter for Joe Biden in a positive way. Now, there are always detractors, right? There are people that vote for Donald Trump who don't like things about Donald Trump. But in the end, when people are going to see the two visions for the future of America, that young people and people of color across the United States, not to mention the vast majority of American workers, know that it's Joe Biden that's fighting for them and Joe Biden that'll do better for them, Donald Trump will be a disaster for those groups.
Incredibly naive. Again, the young people Joe Biden needs aren't voting for Donald Trump. They don't support Trump. The risk is them just not voting altogether, and tepidly signaling support for gun safety laws and abortion rights is not going to sufficiently mobilize young people.
Yeah. That's it. That's it. Oh, until Matt Gaetz removes Mike Johnson. Who knows? Who knows how that's going to play out? Who knows how that's going to play out? Isn't the government supposed to be shutting down today? When is the government shut down? When is the next political football? Oh, so they pushed it to the 19th. If I understand this, if I read this correctly, I think they pushed it to the 19th. To the 19th. Oh, good lord.
Biden needs a concrete action plan that he talks about nonstop to mobilize these voters. And even if he has that, it still might not work because they can't put aside the fact that he's supporting a genocide. But Joy Reid, to her credit, who's been excellent lately, she asked a follow-up question since, she seemingly wasn't convinced, and it gets so much worse.
And you don't think that the White House needs to adjust or that the Biden re-election campaign needs to adjust in any way its messaging on issues of war and peace? Because these are issues, we are on MLK Day, and we do know that one of the things that Dr. King did later in his life was to oppose the Vietnam War. And this was an important issue to him, as important in the end of his life as fighting for living wages and for racial justice. Issues of war and peace are passion issues. They're voting issues. And for a lot of younger Americans, not even just younger Americans, but a lot of progressives and a lot of just people who have a humanist view of the world, the Gaza issue is a voting issue. So you're saying that people will ignore that? You don't think that the White House...
She's right. Welcome, Carpe. That's true. We don't believe their campaign promises anymore because they've turned out to be lies. Too many elections in a row. We all saw them trip over themselves to avoid using the power that they have to help working people, working and poor people. We don't believe them anymore.
House needs to in any way adjust its messaging on that?
Well, look, here's what the White House has been doing. They're fighting, what has become a mortal enemy of the United States.
Stop. I hate when politicians answer questions like this. This is so frustrating. It's such a simple question. It's such a simple question. Yes or no. Whatever.
States, and that's Vladimir Putin. They're standing up for democracy in Ukraine. They're fighting against terrorism in the Middle East. Those are the things that I think the messages that the Biden administration needs to make sure they're getting out to people. But look,
are we though?
Nobody likes war. We'd like to have all of this ratcheted down and go away. And I know the president wants that, right? But you have to have a careful,
funny way of showing it.
Foreign policy expert in the White House who understands how to manage all that in a very difficult environment. You think Donald Trump has shown that he can do that? Do you think Donald Trump would?
That's whataboutism. I don't care. I know that Trump would probably be exponentially worse. I know that. But he's currently not in power and he's currently not able to do anything about this.
Would handle this better than Joe Biden? The answer clearly is no.
We're doomed. We are doomed. She asks him about Gaza, and he pivots to Putin and ends with, well, at least Biden's not as bad as Trump. I promise you, that is not going to resonate with young people who want him to stop doing a genocide. But they don't get it. But what that answer does tell me is that the Biden administration doesn't actually have a plan to meaningfully address young voters' concerns. So the question is, how exactly does Joe Biden plan to win back the White House without young voters? I mean, there's two responses to this. First, he either assumes that they'll acquiesce in November, and that's a possibility, but I mean, it's a big if. And it was a gamble that Hillary Clinton also made in 2016 that didn't pay off. So I don't know that I'd want to make that gamble if I were Joe Biden with how much is at stake. But second, he maybe thinks that he doesn't need young voters. He can just use negative partisanship against Trump again to win over voters, in particular, voters that Trump is losing, moderate voters, independents. And that seems to be his game plan, right? So after Trump won the Iowa caucus in a landslide, here's what Joe Biden tweeted. Looks like Donald Trump just won Iowa. He's the clear front runner on the other side at this point. But here's the thing. This election was always going to be you and me versus extreme MAGA Republicans. It was true yesterday and it'll be true tomorrow. So if you'll notice, he's making a really interesting distinction here. It's us versus extreme MAGA Republicans, meaning not all Republicans are bad, just the most sycophantic Trump supporters.
Which is nonsense to begin with. Careful foreign policy expert, a white supremacist who keeps the quiet part quiet.
Now, I think that this is naive to an extent because the Republican Party is the party of Donald Trump. So to pretend as if there's this massive swath of Republicans who are just like itching to vote against Trump, I think they're probably going to suck it up and vote for Trump. So the intent behind this, though, is to signal to moderate Republicans that they are welcome in Joe Biden's coalition. And this is what Joe Scarborough hinted at as well.
We're running, he says, against extreme MAGA Republicans. Mika, it's not an us versus them. Joe Biden's not saying all Republicans are bad guys. All Republicans hate the rule of law. All Republicans still are going to Chinese religious cult websites to get their information. No, he's talking about extreme MAGA Republicans. It makes a difference because there are a lot of Republicans out there.
Nah. Listen, if that was the case, then explain to me how, like, the most MAGA of MAGA gets a unanimous vote to become the second in line to the presidency. Welcome. Like my wife discussed this morning, Trump has 70 million supporters that will crawl through broken glass to vote. Biden better up his game. Yeah. And the thing is, the reason why I'm bringing, the reason why I'm sounding the alarms, and most people who are looking at this are sounding the alarms, is because there is no wiggle room at this time. If this is the same sentiment that we're going in 6 months from now, there's no room. There's nothing you can do. It's Jover at that point. So the time to act is now.
That again, this is about conversion. There are a lot of independents out there that Joe Biden's going to get voting for him.
I think that Joe Scarborough is correct to assume that converting moderates and independents is Joe Biden's strategy here. And in some ways, it could pay off, right? I think that his position on abortion is going to help him with independents, for example, and maybe some moderate Republicans, although not much. But with that being said, it's wishful thinking to believe that you're going to make up enough ground with moderates and independents to account for the hemorrhaging of young support. I'm not saying that you forego the strategy of courting moderates altogether, but it's not a binary choice, and it's not something that should be your main strategy.
I mean, like, it's also not, it should be, you need to be getting your base out, okay? Whoever gets the center will win this election? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that whoever gets their base out more is going to win the election. I mean, I could be wrong, but the way I see it is whoever gets their base out to vote wins. Better start building dual power and prepare to fight fascist chuds in the streets. Biden is going to up his game. He's a Zionist and a capitalist. I don't disagree with that.
It should be supplemental to your existing strategy of mobilizing young people and your core base, people of color. You still need young voters to win, even if you win a lot of moderates and independents. That really doesn't change the reality of electoral politics regardless. So Biden has to make a direct appeal to young voters, and it just seems like there's no message there. There's no attempt there aside from Trump bad, which is obvious. And you might not want to listen to an extremist radical lefty like me, but take it from Obama alum who also feel like Biden's campaign strategy up until this point has been inadequate. This Politico article talks about a real divide between the Biden and Obama camps, and the Obama camp is sounding the alarm about Biden's re-election campaign because they think that it's too bare bones and Biden needs to announce key staffers in swing states immediately so he can make up, the ground that he's lost. So everyone can see that Biden is in danger. Biden knows that Biden is in danger based on reports that we're seeing. The question is, why isn't he taking action to address these deficiencies? Why aren't we seeing him course correct right now? Is he honestly waiting until...
Right. That's my point. That's literally my argument. That's exactly my argument. And this is what your vote means. Another way of putting it is well, this is the effects of capitalism on what presumably are supposed to be democratic institutions. Does that make sense? A lot of center voters are fair weather voters who will vote if it's convenient. The GOP is fighting like heck to make it harder and harder to vote. The swing voters, yeah, I don't know if there's like that many swing voters. It's a very, very partisan kind of setup right now. That's just wild. Look at that.
Till June to make these changes? I mean, when things are this bad, you need to start right now. And yes, things can change, and I hope that they do. But in order for things to change, the time to actually take action to make it change is right now. You have to stop the genocide. You have to stop it. Not just because of electoral reasons, but because genocide is bad. On top of that, you have to promote specific policies that appeal to core demographics of the Democratic Party, young people, Arab Americans, black voters, and you have to take the threat of Trump seriously, not just say Trump is a threat to democracy, but act like it. Biden has been campaigning on Trump's threat to democracy, and he's right to do that. But simply pointing out Trump's dictatorial ambitions isn't going to be enough. You need to give people a reason to vote for you. And Biden isn't doing that. But if he truly believes American democracy is at stake, he will start acting like it and get his shit together immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't have honestly said it better myself. So the reason we went through all that. The Senate rejects Bernie Sanders' bid to probe Israel over Gaza human rights concerns. So in a notable test on Tuesday, Bernie Sanders forced colleagues to decide whether investigating human rights abuses in the Israel-Hamas war, a step towards potentially limiting the U.S. military aid to Israel as its devastating attacks on Gaza grind past 100 days. Senators overwhelmingly rejected the effort of first-of-its-kind tapping into decades-old law that would require the State Department to, within 30 days, produce a report on whether the Israeli war effort in Gaza is violating human rights and international accords. If the administration failed to do so, U.S. military aid to Israel, long assured, without question, could be quickly halted. So the TLDR to this is 72 opposed, 11 joined Bernie Sanders. And again, how embarrassing is it that the Democratic-controlled Senate voted in this manner? Even more embarrassing and more shameful, Rand Paul voted with Bernie Sanders on this.
Climate change is not a tragedy. Climate change is a crime against humanity committed on the part of these oil companies.
These reports are pretty scary, but are they true?
Has there actually been any global warming?
All of us would like to believe that corporations do the right thing. They're not intentionally deceiving us or destroying the world.
If we all work toward the same goal, I believe we can change the perceptions of the American people about energy.
We need you to be an important part of it. Together, we can make a difference.
Did we aggressively fight against some of the science? Yes.
For decades, fossil fuel companies have coordinated what is arguably the most consequential deception campaign in history. And so far, they've gotten away with it.
We have a mountain of evidence showing that they knew for decades exactly where we'd be today and lied about it time and time again.
The state of California is suing Big Oil in one of the most significant legal challenges the industry has ever faced.
The financial liability that the companies could face is, potentially existential. It's a huge threat to the industry, and they know it.
This lawsuit tells a story about how some of the biggest companies in the world lied to protect themselves. But it also does something much bigger. For the first time in history, it could actually force them to pay for the damage.
There's what our street, one street over, looked like in the morning, just flames flaring up everywhere. And then the next day we got to our lot, and this is all that remained of our house.
Bill Vosberg is a retired teacher in Santa Rosa. In 2017, he and his wife lost their home to the Tubbs fire.
The fire jumped over Highway 101.
I've been watching an orange glow that I thought you guys had under control, but I'm starting to see like flames flickering.
There's our house down there in the courtyard, and the fire just ripped through here all the way down there, blowing like a storm.
At the time, the Tubbs fire was the most destructive fire in California history.
It was like driving through a mini war zone. The fire had destroyed 5,000 homes here in Santa Rosa.
But the fire no longer holds that title. Since 2017, Californians have lived through 8 of the 10 largest wildfires in the state's history.
The August complex fire surpasses 1 million acres.
Oh my God. Oh. There's like explosions everywhere.
The entire scope of my vision is nothing but ruins.
That's wild. Not enough, and even if they did, they would cry poverty and the government would bail them out.
Throughout the state, the wildfires have been longer, harder, more intense. We had tremendous losses ourselves, but we're one of thousands of people, billions of dollars that these fires have cost.
And it's not just fires. For years, California has been on the front lines of record-breaking heat waves, drought, and flooding.
And I think it's time that we look directly at the sources. The number one culprit is CO2 emissions. Fossil fuel companies play a direct part in the misery we suffered, as well as thousands of other people. The tragedy for me is that the oil companies knew since the early 70s, in the case of Exxon, that burning their products was going to lead to global warming.
In the 70s and 80s, I graduated from college in 1981. ExxonMobil had a very good reputation. ExxonMobil was doing science that was as good or better than any academic group at that time.
That's Naomi Oreskes, a Harvard historian of science who's spent decades studying how companies like Exxon lied to the public.
I love this graph because in this graph, we take ExxonMobil's own work. So ExxonMobil scientists created a set of forecasts in the 1980s, forecasting what would happen to climate change in the future. And then in this document, we compare ExxonMobil's predicted changes with other models that were available at that time, and also with what really happened in the real world. And one of the things that's fascinating about these data is, first of all, they show that ExxonMobil's predictions were very accurate. The company scientists had a very good handle on what was...
Yeah, so like this is exactly why it's so frustrating to listen to people, like to listen to people say things like, "Oh, well, you know, it's everything is fine." We knew about this for decades, okay? This was known information from way before I was even born. They have known since the Industrial Revolution. They had a mini ice age. Naomi's great, yes.
Likely to happen in the years to come.
Dr. Hoffert, is that correct?
We were excellent scientists.
Yes, you were.
At the time, Exxon was also an industry leader in renewable energy, funding groundbreaking research in solar cells. But in the late 80s and early 90s, something changed.
Hello, I'm Gord Thompson. Today I'll be talking to you about a debate that's going on in the country right now, and one in which Exxon plans to be very active.
Something shifted at ExxonMobil. If we look at when this shift occurs, it's at the moment when climate change goes from being a prediction about the future to being something that scientists are saying, oh, actually, this is already starting to happen now, and the world is coming together to try to do something about it.
In 1997, world leaders met in Kyoto in an effort to draft the first legally binding treaty to reduce global emissions.
Mr. Albert Gore Jr.,
The United States remains firmly committed to a strong, binding target that will reduce our own emissions by nearly 30% from what they would otherwise be.
But behind the scenes, another plan had already been set in motion.
Right now, a United Nations effort is moving toward decision in 1997 to cut the use of fossil fuels based on the unproved theory that they affect the Earth's climate.
Based on the unproved theory that they affect the Earth's climate. Meanwhile, like the audacity, the gall of this climate criminal to say, after knowing that his own company knew about this for, at that point, 17 years? From the 80s to 97, it's about 17-ish years, more or less. The audacity, how, like, just brazen to be able to just get out there in front of the cameras and lie like that. Money talks and everything else can go F itself until we as a society change this priority. Nothing at all will change. Nothing else at all will change. I don't disagree. I think you're right, unfortunately.
In the 1990s, ExxonMobil becomes part of something called the Global Climate Coalition. This is a network of oil companies, coal companies, automobile manufacturers who consciously and deliberately set out to prevent the United States from signing on to the Kyoto Protocol.
Through front groups like the Global Climate Coalition, the fossil fuel industry spent millions advertising and lobbying to kill U.S. involvement in Kyoto. The Senate ultimately never ratified the treaty, and in 2001, George W. Bush officially pulled the U.S. out. Documents from the State Department later revealed that the administration had rejected Kyoto in part based on input from the Global Climate Coalition. The industry had found a winning strategy, and in private, they were very clear about how that strategy worked.
Okay, so this document, Global Climate Science Communications Action Plan, this is a really good example. This is from 1998. They say the goal of this project is that a majority of the American people, including industry leadership, recognizes that significant uncertainties exist in climate science and therefore raises questions among those, e.g. Congress, who chart the future U.S. course on global climate change.
Scientific evidence remains inconclusive as to whether human activities affect the global climate.
And what's so frustrating is that there's still people echoing these nonsense talking points.
98, climate change is no longer a theory, it's an observed fact. So this is explicitly about stopping the US government from acting on the known scientific knowledge at that time.
They lied. And yes, I was misled. Others were misled.
That's Chuck Hagel, a former senator who was instrumental in stopping US participation in Kyoto, admitting that the industry was lying to the public.
If they had said then, if they'd held their hands up then and said, yes, this is real, could it have been different?
Oh, absolutely. It would have changed everything. I think it would have changed the average citizen's appreciation.
Yeah, so another way of putting it is that capital has so much power that they supersede reality and can influence and impose their influence irrespective of whether or not it's true. He's basically admitting if they would have just told us the truth, we would have acted because we are beholden to them. We're beholden to the fossil fuel industry. That's the implication here. If they would have just told us the truth, then we may have acted differently. But because they told us it wasn't, or they put enough doubt, we couldn't act. So in other words, we are beholden to them. Literally gaslighting the world. Literally. Margaret Thatcher coined the name global warming when they smashed the coal mining unions in Britain. I did not know that.
Of climate change.
And Kyoto was just the beginning.
Real question is it dangerous? Is it going to harm people?
Exactly.
There's not a 97% consensus on that?
Of course there's not.
The idea that Bill Nye is just going around saying CO2 is up, therefore global warming is dangerous, we should be concerned, it's not. It's not dangerous.
Look, the air is ugly, it's unpleasant to breathe, but the reality is there's no health risk.
No health risk to, dirty air, even though, we've known this since, the beginning of time itself. It's not just echoing. There's a not insignificant number of people who are basically global warming. Yeah, I've had in my gas guzzling pickup to roll coal, so F yourself. That's true. Yeah. That's true. Well, maybe I should have been more specific, but yes, you are correct. Mostly I'm talking about the people that come in here and say these type of nonsense. Health risk, you're just going to live until you don't anymore. Yeah. There you go. What? Black smog? Causing respiratory issues? Nah. Remember, folks, cigarettes don't cause cancer, okay? At this time, you could still smoke in McDonald's. Fair point. Don't forget, folks, cigarettes don't cause cancer.
We have this kind of air in India and China all the time. No public health emergency.
In the years since Kyoto, Exxon and other industry giants have doubled down on their strategy of using PR to sow doubt and delay action.
Many of these ads were designed in a way as to say, well, the science is very unsettled. We don't really know for sure. Let's not panic. We also know that they funded research programs at universities. They supported workshops and conferences that were designed to cast doubt on climate science. The scale is extremely large.
And by all accounts, their investment has paid off.
Cigarettes reduce domestic violence. Yeah, cigarettes don't, guns do. And these same people are begging for the COVID vaccine on their deathbed from COVID. Yeah. I've seen so many sad stories like that, and it's so infuriating to watch people propagate this. I've seen so many stories of people exactly as you describe, incredibly sick, now begging for the vaccine when it's too late. It's too late at that point. When you're on the ventilator, when you're given when the doctor comes in and just says, you know what, we're gonna have to intubate. It's too late. It's too late. And to kind of circle back with the original commentary and conversation, is it not then logical to shoulder the blame of these people who propagate these lies knowingly? The answer to that is yes, just as the same as you would bear responsibility if you sold a gun to a criminal, the same way that the Biden administration bears responsibility for selling weapons to Israel.
Efforts to address climate
The same way the oil industry bears responsibility.
change have repeatedly crashed and burned in the toxic political environment shaped by the industry.
I asked the chair, you know what this is? It's a snowball. So it's very, very cold out. So here, Mr. President, catch this.
All while global temperature...
Checkmate. My gag reflex is triggered when one says that word.
have continued to rise.
Is this the apocalypse?
He just retired last year.
Are we looking for the signs? We had a UFO situation the other day. I found a frog in my pool.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
All of this with the
God, this guy's so insufferable. Jesse Waters.
global warming and that a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax.
How is it that we've been having more or less the same conversation for so many decades?
Much of what they did was modeled on what the tobacco industry had done. The same people who had worked for the tobacco industry casting doubt on the science shifted to work on casting doubt on the science of climate change.
But the example of big tobacco may be just as instructive for those who hope to hold big oil accountable.
Committee will come to order.
Oh, it's cold out. Yeah, and what's funny is that, like, the reason why this is happening, the reason why you're getting these, like, waves of cold and the way that we're seeing it is because of global warming, not despite it. It's because of it. When you have an unstable polar vortex that's hanging out, normally just doing its thing where it's supposed to be, you get these periods where it just goes, you know, way more south than it normally would go.
In 1998, the tobacco industry was successfully sued for their deceptive and harmful marketing. Lawsuits between 46 states and Big Tobacco resulted in the largest settlement in U.S. history. It forced a major shift in marketing practices and dissolved industry front groups. The agreement also had many issues. With little oversight, the money flowed to the states, but not necessarily to addressing the harms of tobacco. But the settlement remains an example of massive consequences for harmful marketing, which California's lawsuit could soon force on big oil.
They predicted with terrifying accuracy exactly where we would be today. And they knew then that if the people of California and America, the world, knew what they knew, it was a problem for their business model.
Rob Bonta is the Attorney General of California. He's currently leading the state's lawsuit against 5 of the biggest oil companies in the world.
We have presented a very robust complaint, over 100 pages long, that lays out our case in very exacting detail.
The first thing California's lawsuit aims to do is put a stop to the industry's misinformation.
One of the main remedies is stop lying, stop false advertising, stop making false claims, stop deceiving the people.
California's lawsuit also seeks money, a lot of it, to address real damages in the state that have resulted in part from the industry's deception campaign.
We're asking them to create an abatement fund funded by the defendants to the tune of billions of dollars, and it will pay for adaptation and mitigation efforts. Things like clean air centers for the dirty air that they've created, cooling centers for the extreme heat that they've created, water storage to address drought, seawalls to address sea rise.
The California case is so important because, first of all, California is a major oil-producing state. It's the 5th largest economy in the world, so it's much more of a potential threat to the industry. And it also sends a signal to other attorneys general that, you know, the big dog's in the game, so it's safe to get in here.
California's case is just the latest in a wave of similar lawsuits across the country, but it could represent a tipping point.
So if you add up all the states that might file, the financial liability that the companies could face is, you know, potentially existential. It's a huge threat to the industry, and they know it. That's why they're so afraid of these cases.
The jet stream is all effed up. It shouldn't be this cold here. Yep. However, no pity for those people, because like the parable says, when the dead man goes to heaven after drowning, God, why did you not save me? And God replies, I sent you a radio, announcement, a rescue boat, and a helicopter. Why are you here? True.
There are many who question ExxonMobil's commitment because of what was said over 30 years ago, or what they think Exxon knew back then. Frankly, I'm more interested in what ExxonMobil knows today.
The year is 2024. Exxon is as profitable as ever. And even though they invest only a tiny fraction of their budget in renewable alternatives, they have diversified their messaging strategy.
Here's what ExxonMobil knows. Climate change is real. Human activity plays a major role, and it is one of the major problems facing the world today.
Outright denial is still a thing. It has not gone away. But in addition to that, they also have a strategy saying that they need to be part of the solution.
The oil and natural gas industry
are taking action,
investing in technologies that reduce our environmental footprint.
But if you actually look at the budgets that these companies have for these other forms of fuels, it's tiny. 98% of their activities, 99% of their activities are still focused on the core fossil fuel industry.
In a recent statement, the American Petroleum Institute called the California lawsuit meritless and a distraction, and said that climate policy is for Congress to decide, not the court system.
In California, when someone breaks the law, they need to be held accountable, and are held accountable in court. I don't want to overrepresent the importance of litigation. Everyone who cares about climate change has a role to play.
This was a real tragedy that was really hard to go through. If they had made an adjustment to renewable fuels as early as the 70s, we could be in a much better place than we are right now. But instead, they continue to rake in their billions of profits, lie, deny, delay, so that they could continue to burn fossil fuels, leading to the destruction that we have now.
Yep.
I hope that the state will win against the fossil fuel companies. It would be nice to see some of the money that the oil companies have gotten for profits go into making the lives whole of the people that have suffered as a result of the fires their products helped produce.
True. I would like to see ExxonMobil get involved in wind wave energy production and storage and geothermal energy development. They already have the tools needed. Yeah, I would like to see ExxonMobil nationalized so that they can do that. Because that's not, just because they have the tools is not going to dictate what they're going to do. So yeah, this would be a case of nationalizing them. On that note, Greenland losing 30 million tons of ice an hour, or metric million? Yeah. Of ice an hour, the study reveals total is 20% higher than thought and may have implications for collapse of globally important North Atlantic Ocean currents. The Greenland ice cap is losing an average of 30 million tons of ice an hour due to the climate crisis. The study has revealed, which is 20% more than was previously thought. Million, yes. Some scientists are concerned that this additional source of fresh water is pouring into the North Atlantic might mean a collapse of the AMOC, of the ocean current called the AMOC is closer to being triggered with severe consequences for humanity. Major ice loss from Greenland as a result of global heating has been recorded for decades. The techniques employed to date, such as measuring the height of the ice sheet or its weight via gravity data, are good at determining the losses that end up in the ocean and drive up sea level. However, they cannot account for the retreat of glaciers that already lie mostly below sea level in the narrow fjords around the island. In the study, satellite photos were analyzed by scientists to determine the end position of Greenland's many glaciers every month from 1985 to 2022. This showed large and widespread shortening and total amount to trillions of tons of lost ice. And you can see how that visually looks like. 7.2 billion tons a day, ice loss and accelerating. Yep. Meanwhile, oh, this is phenomenal. Phenomenal stuff. Great dance with wild capitalism's great dance with transition impossible to imagine. Drinking a martini in Dubai without Arctic ice. Greenland startup begins shipping glacier glacier ice to cocktail bars in the UAE. Yeah. Good stuff. We're totally not screwed. No, it's million. Not screwed. We're totally not screwed. Everything is fine. The changes around Greenland are tremendous and they're happening everywhere. Almost every glacier has retreated over the past few decades, said Dr. Chad Green at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in the U.S. who led the research. It makes sense that if you dump fresh water to the North Atlantic Ocean, then you certainly get a weakening of the AMOC, though I don't have an intuition for how much weakening. The AMOC was already known to be at its weakest in 1,600 years, and in 2021, researchers spotted warning signs of a tipping point. A recent study suggested a collapse could happen as soon as 2025. In the worst-case scenario, a significant part of Greenland's ice sheet itself, also thought by scientists to be close to a tipping point of irreversible melting, with ice equivalent of 1 to 2 meters of sea level rise probably already expected. A study published in the journal Nature used artificial intelligence techniques to map out more than 235,000 glacier end positions over the 38-year period at a resolution of 120 meters. This showed the Greenland ice sheet that had lost an area of about 5,000 square kilometers of ice at its margin since 1985, equivalent to 1 trillion tons of ice. The most recent update from a project that collates all other measurements from Greenland's ice found that 221 billion tons of ice have been lost every year since 2003. The new study adds another 43 billion tons a year, making the total loss of about 30 million tons an hour on average. The scientists said there's some concern that any small source of fresh water that serves as that may serve as a tipping point that could trigger a full-scale collapse of the AMOC, disrupting the global weather patterns, ecosystems, and global food security. Yet fresh water from the glacier retreat of Greenland is not included in oceanographic models at this present. The influx of less dense fresh water into sea slows the usual process of heavier salt water sinking in the polar region and driving the AMOC. The UAE is end-stage capitalism as a physical entity. True. I made ham corn, twice baked potatoes, and brownies. That brownies sounds good. The family's here, so I gotta go. No problem. Thank you so much for stopping by. Take care. Professor Tim Lenton of the University of Exeter, UK, and not part of the study, said the additional freshwater input to the North Atlantic is a concern, particularly for the formation of deep water in Labrador and Erminger Seas with the subpolar gyre, as other evidence suggests these are the regions that are most prone to being tipped into an off or collapsed state. That would be like a partial AMOC collapse, but unfolding faster and having profound impacts to the UK, Western Europe, parts of North America, and the Sahel region, where the West African monsoon could be severely disrupted. Whether this previously unaccounted source is enough for freshwater to make a difference depends on how close we are to that subpolar gyre tipping point. Recent models suggest it could be close already at this present level of global warming. Yeah, I mean, like, the one thing that we always find is that every one of these studies we talk about, it always ends with the same tone of, yeah, this stuff is happening a lot faster than we originally thought. And yet nothing gets done. We're just going to go over this for like 5 seconds. CNN canceled the New Hampshire Republican primary debate because I think Nikki Haley backed out. So, yeah. Conservative Supreme Court justices consider weakening federal agency power. Yes, consider join us in following Heat 420_. True. A 40-year-old Supreme Court precedent that over the years have become a bugbear on the right because it was viewed It is viewed as bolstering the power of federal agencies came under tough scrutiny on Wednesday, today, as the current justices consider whether to overturn it. The court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, is skeptical of broad assertions of federal agency authority, heard two related cases involving a fisheries regulation that called into question whether the 1984 ruling in Chevron versus Natural Resource Defense Council should be consigned to history. Based on the lengthy 3.5-hour oral arguments on Wednesday, some conservative members on the court appear to be leaning towards overturning Chevron precedent, although it's unclear whether they have the majority to do so. If they have a clear majority to do so. The court could also take a different approach and place new limits on when lower court judges can defer to agencies without overturning Chevron. Ironically, at the time it was decided, Chevron was a win for deregulatory efforts of the Reagan administration, with the court's ruling that judges should defer to federal agencies in interpreting the law when the language of a statute is ambiguous. Fun fact, the Northwest Passage shipping lane is close to being open for year-round for commercial traffic and eventually tourism. Nice! Very good, very normal, very, very sustainable, very good. Nothing could possibly be indicating of something worse coming. The ruling, hey, but commerce and profits, I guess. The ruling allowed the EPA to move forward with a Clean Air Act regulation that was favorable to polluting facilities, much to the displeasure of environmental groups that wanted the court to give the agency less leeway. During that period, the EPA was led by Ann Gorsuch, the mother of conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch, although she had left the post following the scandal over the agency's management of pollution cleanups by the time the case was argued. Justice Gorsuch has been an outspoken critic of the Chevron ruling. During the arguments on Wednesday, he questioned why a judge who thinks the agency's interpretation of law is wrong would abdicate that responsibility and say automatically whatever the agency says wins. Justice Kavanaugh, another conservative, asked why the Chevron precedent should get the normal respect that long-standing rulings do, questioning the precedent on the grounds that it does not promote the stability in the law because it allows agencies to constantly change positions depending on who is in charge. Yeah, you see, when they talk about we have respect for long-standing rulings, that doesn't really mean anything, right? That doesn't mean anything coming from this court. The quote, the reality of how this works is Chevron itself ushers in shocks to the system every 4 to 8 years when a new administration comes in. Liberal justices strongly defended the status quo, with Elena Kagan, Justice Elena Kagan giving practical examples of when it might be better for courts to defer to an agency's expertise, such as whether a cholesterol-lowering product should be classified as a dietary supplement or a drug. Sometimes law runs out, sometimes there's a gap, sometimes there's a genuine ambiguity. Also, there's a lot of, pieces at play here, and it would be easier, and in my opinion, probably more beneficial if you had specific agencies designed to do and review these things to be in charge of this, the FDA or the EPA. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, another liberal, made a similar point, saying Chevron helps courts stay away from policy making. How the court rules is likely to rest on how Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett vote. Both are members of the conservative majority, but did not appear, based on their questions, to be as eager to overturn Chevron as their colleagues. Barrett expressed concerns about the disruptive consequences of overturning precedent. Yeah, again, that means nothing in this court. In practice, the Chevron ruling initially meant that both Democratic and Republican presidents could take advantage of flexibility gave to agencies in implementing new regulations on a wider range of issues. Decades later, with business interests and conservatives more hostile than ever to what they call the administrative state, the deep state, the president came to be seen, at least on the right, as being more beneficial to progressives who want to make aggressive use of federal agency power than it is to conservatives. Really, the mission on the other side is to make it very, very hard to pass laws that create effective programs that meet modern problems. The real goal is to diminish the power of the federal government, said David Doniger, the environmental lawyer who argued and lost the 1984 case. Yep, environmental groups on the and others on the left hope to keep the ruling in place so agencies can tackle difficult issues like climate change, especially in the absence of Congress passing any major legislation itself. Jonathan Adler, professor at Case Western Reserve University School of Law, said there were always disagreements among lawyers and academics over how courts should apply the Chevron ruling. It's been bubbling around for a while, but certainly on the right, there is a concern that agencies are not much faithfully executing Congress's instructions as they are trying to figure out ways of doing what they want to do. But he's added the question is whether you need to overturn Chevron to arrest that dynamic. The Supreme Court has already addressed the issue of agencies exerting broad power without clear congressional instruction from other angles in recent rulings that struck down the President Biden's federal student loan relief plan, blocked his COVID vaccination or test requirements for larger businesses, and curbed the EPA's authority to limit carbon emissions from power plants. Those cases did not rely on Chevron analysis, but instead said simply that on issues of broad national impact, there needs to be an explicit authorization from Congress, an approach known as the major questions doctrine. The case argued on Wednesday involved a challenge to a less far-reaching government regulation that would require fishing vessels to help fund the collection of scientific data to assist with fishery conservation and management. The court took up appeals brought by operators of fishing vessels actively in the herring fishery off the Atlantic coast, which challenged the 2020 rule applying to New England fisheries. Lower courts in both cases ruled for the federal government. The challengers say the National Marine Fisheries Service, the federal body that oversees ocean resources, did not have the authority to issue the regulation under the relevant law, the 1976 Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act. The rule implements a monitoring program that vessel operators are required to fund. The challengers assert that the operators would have to pay up to $710 a day at certain times for independent observers to board their vessels and monitor their operations. The cost would be a significant burden on small owner operators, the challenger said. The fisheries dispute is one of the several in the current court term in which the justices are considering a tax on federal agency power led by business interests and the conservative legal establishment. The makeup of the court itself reflects another front in the war of Trump administration, with the Trump administration having specifically selected judicial nominees in part based on their hostility to the federal bureaucracy. Yeah, the Supreme Court's conservative majority includes 3 Trump appointees: Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. Yep, cool, nice meme. We will definitely see what comes about from that. Folks, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit the follow button. It really does help us out. I saw plenty of new follows. I appreciate that. Thank you for the biddies. Thank you for the follows and subscriptions. I appreciate it. Thank you all. Thank you, Heat, for the biddies. Thank you, Alio, for the biddies. Kami, Mommy, Mad Cat, Wayward Historian, Eric77, Jim Speak, Gray Yeon Wannabe. Thank you for the follows. KF Logan 1875, thank you for the raid. No Justice MTG, thank you for the raid. Conscious Canuck, thank you for the subscription. I appreciate it. Thank you. Quick shout outs to No Justice MTG. Thank you for the raid, and quick shout out to KF Logan 1875. Go follow them if you don't already. I appreciate it. Thank you for bringing your community here. Thank you, Heat. Thank you, Michael Hassler. I appreciate you modding. We have had that for years, and it helps fish stocks have recovered and gets rid of the ones who don't care. Yeah. If you want to support the channel, please make sure you go onto the YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, like the stream, do all that awesome stuff. Follow, spread the word. We are here Monday through Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. If you enjoy the content, come back. Bring a friend. It really does help us out. Thank you all, as always. And final shout out. Thank you, Carpet Packs, for hanging out in the chat. Twitch.tv/carpetpacks. Twitch.tv/AlioShare. I think I got everybody. Twitch.tv/Heat420_. Go follow these wonderful folks. If you see a diamond in chat, chances are they're a content creator of some sort. So go check them out. As always, folks, please stay safe. Please take care of each other. I love you all, and I hope to see you guys in the next one tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Yes, join the YouTube, subscribe, Join the Discord, all that awesome stuff. Thank you guys. See ya. Don't give up. No, I don't think so. Someone stole my username, man. GG. Thank you. Hang tight, folks. We're heading out in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bye-bye.